Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Current from Durango PD, his 26 years experience in law enforcement. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. He's really passionate about leadership and wellness. So welcome to the show, Chief Current. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Paige. It's good to be here with you.
Of course, I've been looking forward to this conversation since we first connected. I really do feel like you have a lot of interesting things to say that I haven't heard before. So I'm excited to dive in, but I was hoping we could first start with a little bit of background for anyone who doesn't know who you are. Give us a little bit of insight.
Yeah, so I was born on the reservation south of Bloomfield, New Mexico, and I was raised actually in Abilene, Texas, or a small town outside of Abilene, and then came back to this area, the Four Corners area, and worked as in law enforcement and the San Juan County Sheriff's Office in New Mexico, and retired there, and then took a second career here in Durango, Colorado. And I started as the deputy chief, and I'm now the chief. Been chief for about a year and a half, so I'm still in field training for chief. But it's it's been a challenging profession. It was interesting when you called me the other day, and I was driving home. It was I was just not in a good space to even talk, and I just started talking about everything, and it was a challenging week, and I think I've had 26 years of challenging weeks. I started on patrol in New Mexico, and to be honest, I think I'll lead with a little bit of foundation. I didn't want to be in law enforcement. I know a lot of people you probably ask, they're like, "Oh, I was dreaming of this when I was younger, and it all fell into place," or "I tested several times," or things of that nature. But realistically, I knew two officers. They were my best friends' dads growing up, and I didn't have a good interaction with them. They were great men, great fathers, but they had this hardness about them, and they weren't kind. And that was my experience with officers. It wasn't getting pulled over and having bad interactions, and I had some good and bad throughout my life, like probably most people. But I was going to college. I ran out of money, and I heard that the law enforcement profession was a way to have them pay for your school. I jumped into it, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, in a matter of weeks, I thought, this is what I've been doing my whole life. This is what my dad taught me. My dad was very service oriented, and I loved the team aspect of it because I grew up in Texas playing football, and there was the two-a-days and the coaches screaming in your face and yelling, and the structure, and then the team, building and showing up as a team and the responsibilities of that. I felt that right away. I felt the camaraderie. And then I also saw the human aspect, a lot of things that I didn't like about the profession. Overall, I was in love with it. And I transitioned through, so I would call my career like a different phases of learning. Like I said, I feel like I'm on FTO right now as a new chief. I feel like I've been on FTO from the year 2000 because you can have multiple different jobs within one career. Like I jumped from undercover narcotics to director of a police academy. I mean, that's a big jump. And I feel like I've been uncomfortable my entire career and I've been in a state of learning, and it's never stopped. And I think that discomfort and provides meaning and drives people, and that's been a big part of my career.
I love that story. And there's a few things I want to dissect in there. One, I really believe because I relate to you in the sense that I did not start out where I was like, I'm gonna work in law enforcement wellness. Like that was never a thing. I think that there's probably a lot of easier spaces to do that in. But I think that sometimes we just fall exactly where we were meant to be, maybe without even knowing it. And a lot of our life experience prepares us for that. You said you had 26 years of discomfort, 26 years of challenging situations. How did you find the drive and the resilience to keep going through those hard times?
I think a lot of it was the way that I was raised, and my dad instilled, to to maybe put a pause on happiness and go after more meaning in your life and more purpose driven, and have that investment where the joy will come in on the back end. And realistically, I started wanting a family. Then I had to figure out how to support that family. And I found myself in law enforcement, like you said. And while it was challenging, there was always meaning because there's people. And anytime there's people involved, it's complex. And I love people. And there's the saying that I hate people, but I love individuals. I've heard before, but I love people and individuals. Like I just once you get past that shell and are able to connect with individuals, and that's what law enforcement is. It's one individual at a time, and it's always different.
Mm.
And that service is always there.
I like and I wanted to maybe talk about this later, but I want to bring it up now. I've been talking about this lately about this idea of short-term discomfort for long-term gain. And that was what popped in my head when you said that of like, yes, like putting happiness on pause, knowing that there's a bigger picture, knowing that on the other side, there's a clearing in the forest and it's all going to be worth the hard work and the dedication that it took to get there. How important do you think it is to be uncomfortable? And my second question to that is why do you think so many people are so afraid of that discomfort?
Well, I one of the things I do is I listen to podcasts on the way to work, and then on the way home I listen to music because I try to turn back into a dad,
Mm,
and I try to disconnect. But that a lot of the podcasts I've been listening to lately, and the reading, and just the conversation with my brother and other people, I've been trying to unpack a few things. And 26 years in this profession, and I mean, you're constantly dealing with trauma. You're constantly having to make decisions. You're having to make decisions in stress, and that wears you down completely. And I've always had this fear, and you talk about fear. I've always had this fear of becoming hard
mm,
and becoming a different person. And I think we trade our innocence, or who we were when we were young. Um, there I think I love being around kids. I love being around children. I want to become as I was when I was young, become a little child again internally, but we give that away,
mm,
and we continually mourn the loss of that innocence. And that's where I think a lot of our stress and our problems can come from. And then but then we trade that for experience. And if you have experience, then you can be the officer, you can be the leader, you can be the person that people depend on, and you can be successful in what you do. And I think that's vital. And another thing that really drove me throughout my career to continue is, and I mean, a lot of people say that you need to seek balance in your life, or there is that balance. And I don't think there is balance. You just got to get through things, and then you got to make it up on the other side, or you make it up in the beginning, or you make it up during your individual days, and you have to dissect your day and be very intentional to do that. Like if you become a sex crimes detective, which I never really saw myself being a sex crimes detective, but you start seeing that the kids are being injured, and the capacity that you have with your individual talent, and the training that you have, the difference that you can make in children's lives, then you start showing up to work. Not just showing up, but you show up.
mm,
And there is no FMLA, there is no intermittent FMLA, and you got to, you tell your wife that, you know what, it's going to be a long 2 years. I signed up for this, and if I'm gonna occupy this space, then I'm going to show up, and I'm going to be that person, because I'm not going to occupy this space when somebody else could come in and actually do a really good job. And then it seems like that almost never quits. I mean, you can get into certain things within the profession that will allow a little bit more time at home, and you can have that space, and you can raise your kids, and you can, you know, and but going back to your question, I think that's kind of what drives individuals to keep going and be able to push through all the peaks and the valleys.
Yeah. I agree with you that I think that it's never ever going to be completely balanced. If we're always searching for that level, it may never come. There's always going to be, one is going to outweigh the other always. I really like that you talked about one, understanding that, communicating that to the people around you, and also knowing, again, it goes back to what we talked about short-term discomfort, long-term gain. You saying, hey, it's going to be a long 2 years. 2 years in the scope of our lives is short term, right? Compared to the rest of your life. Short term discomfort, long term gain, understanding that the valleys don't last forever as long as you keep moving, right? As long as you keep in that forward trajectory, you will get to the other side of things. And also understanding that the peaks don't last forever either, and so I really like this idea of how do you try to stay level emotionally through it all. How can you try not to be really down when things are really hard? And how do you try not to get too high when things are really up? And yes, celebrate the wins. Yes, recognize when things are hard, but how do you have that ability to stay level and keep moving forward? So I like that you said like you have to get through it and then understanding the bigger picture and the goal. And I really believe that if you have a why, if you have like a deeper mission or intrinsic motivator that's like, this is why I'm doing this, the pursuit of accomplishing that is worth all the valleys that will come with it.
Yeah, I like how you use the word intrinsic, and I think that's what it becomes because I think when I started, it was, it was the opposite. It was all the external factors, and including my family and needing to support a family, and you're starting out in life not really knowing what you're going to do or how you're going to serve or how you're going to be relevant in the world. And it doesn't take long in the job to see those service opportunities, and it doesn't take long to be introduced to trauma as well. And it is that trauma that drives you, truthfully. I mean, the death. I mean, if you're on a shift and you're responding to calls for service. A lot of that is, a lot of crime. You're taking reports and you're in there taking reports, and then you hear, it's hard to be in the office and hear there's a crash in your area that you're in charge of. And if you were outside being proactive and then you respond and you work the wreck and there's a DUI involved and there's death involved, then that's a driving factor. That there's a lot of meaning there. And you want to get out there and you want to save life and you want to save as much life as possible. And it's a stressful feeling, but it's also a great feeling too. It provides that why, like you're talking about, the victims, the kids, the things that you can do if you just push a little bit harder, if you just do a little bit better, if you're a little bit more effective, if you're a little bit more efficient with your time.
Mhm. I also like want to circle back a little bit to what you said before because I think two things can exist at one time. And you talked about, you know, doing all these things professionally, pushing hard, working hard, dedicating your life to the mission and to helping other people, but also not losing yourself and being able to learn and grow and find joy in life and the things that you're doing. And I think to your point of what you said before, sometimes we feel like it has to be one or the other. It's either we're going to throw ourselves completely here and we're going to lose ourselves, or we're not going to be effective in what we do. And I believe it's hard, and it takes awareness, and like you said, like trying to really identify those spaces. But I think that you can be fully dedicated to your career and you can work really, really hard and you can learn and you can laugh and you can have fun, and you can have a life outside of your career. I think those things can happen. And again, it's never going to be balanced, but how can you still find the good in the hard stuff?
That's a good question. And you're right. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. And I don't think it's going to be balanced.
Mm,
And what I think and we really need to focus on in this profession, well, in all professions really, is our personal life. I mean, is it organized? And if it's not organized, you can't come here to help other people. And I think about, and this is a dumb example, but I think about like when I was watching Superman when I was a little kid. I remember he grabs Lois Lane in the air and says, "Don't worry, I got you." And she's like, "Well, okay, who's got you?" And
mm,
so we always we have to be, nobody has us. We have us. We're good. You just I'm just here to save you, help you, because my life is in order. And it's not that you're better or worse than anybody else. It's just if you're gonna be a law enforcement officer, one, you have to be ethical. You have to have those values. And it's 26 years I've had of looking in the mirror. You can't be looking out the window and complaining about everybody else's problems, but you have to look internally and have your life in order. You have to be getting good sleep, exercise, reading good books. Your mind has to be right. You have to be prepared when you come to work. You can't come to work to rest from an unorganized life,
mm.
or it's just really not going to work.
Okay, so you listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books. Have you heard of the guy? His name's Gary
No,
Vaynerchuk. Have you heard of this guy?
no.
So he says a lot of like kind of off the wall things. He's like really like, to the point when he says things, but he said that everything is your fault. And when you can like come to terms with the fact that everything is your fault, like life becomes easier. And his examples were, if you're complaining about your job, you chose that job. That's your fault. How can and if you're complaining about sleep, okay, like, are you doing the things to sleep better? Like, it's like, how can we take that accountability and understand that we have power to make decisions and to change our circumstances? And it's really interesting. And maybe I'm not explaining exactly right, but I try to think of that sometimes, especially when I'm pointing out, right? I'm like, okay, how can I look at myself and what role did I play with this? And what are the things I have control over and what can I do in this situation? Because there's absolutely like I'm a really big fan of solution driven conversations and controlling the controllable, right? Like I can't control a lot of things, but I can control me and I can take a look and see, okay, maybe I can't control the situation. Maybe that sucked. That was not great and I'm not happy about it, but how can I control my actions and reactions in this situation? So it's this idea of like, how can we look internally to be able to then interact externally, if that makes sense.
No, I love that. Instead of focusing on what's broken, go back to why it's broken and what are we doing? And
Mhm.
we have a therapist here in our office that, and I love it after the critical incident debriefs and people are going to, using the different benefits and seeing different folks. Um, she still just walks around the office and she walks in. And then when I see her comment, I'm like, oh no, because I'm busy. And she's like, hey, what's going on? And she's going to challenge me. And she's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? And I'm like, it's a loaded question. I'm here. I got some things to do. What's going on? And she's like, well, you just seem a little stressed or you seem a little down or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but yeah, this is a hard job. We got things to do. Moving
Yeah.
on. And she says, well, you seemed real happy, 3 weeks ago. What were you doing then that you're not doing now? Well, I don't want to entertain that conversation at the moment. Well, I'm not exercising right now. Why? Because I'm too busy. Are you?
Yeah.
Well, I need to put more intention, more intentional effort. And if our foundations aren't secure, then we're just building on soft ground. And she points that out, and I love that about her. And she's doing that all over the office, and instead of focusing on what's broke, just why it's broken.
Yeah. I really like that idea of building a strong foundation. I think that that's solid, and it's good to have people in your circle that are going to challenge you a little bit, you know? I think that I always like that. I like when people call me out a little bit, especially if I'm making an excuse for something. They're like, "Really? Are you sure?"
So 100%, 100%. I think you have to surround yourself with truth tellers. And when I started in this profession, it almost seemed like your troops would follow you even if they knew you were doing something wrong.
Mm,
And there was that culture. And now, and if there was a DUI on the street and say it was another officer, your officers would call a supervisor to come handle that. Well, my officers are handling that now. It doesn't matter what rank they are. The rank structure is kind of went away in a lot of ways where everybody's holding each other accountable, and they'll hold me accountable. And I think that's where law enforcement's starting to transition, and having those truth tellers around is vital. It's important, and I think it really makes an organization. The only thing worse than seeing an officer doing something wrong is the people standing around watching that officer do something wrong. And I think that's changed. And I'll be vulnerable. I'll be honest. When I was young, I mean, if there's one thing I could have done different, it would have been exercise that leadership without the stars, without the stripes, without the permission, and not just within my own organization, where I felt like I was pretty good within myself and my own organization at taking people aside at any rank and exercising that leadership, but more so like when you take somebody into the jail and that jail is not part of your organization and they're crossing the line a little bit, even if it's being rude or roughing somebody up or whatever, you're like, oh man, that's against our policy and I'm leaving. Or
mm.
are you gonna, take that step and be a truth teller and be a leader, a pursuit into onto the reservation or a complete different jurisdiction, and you see something that's, but being a leader even out there would be the real difference. But you bring up a good point.
What is the most important leadership lesson that you've learned?
There's so many. I've had so many mentors, and I even think some of the bad supervisors I've had are mentors. They've taught me some great things, and they've taught me some things not to do also. Um, I've had some of the smaller lessons, like to not take myself so serious, take the job serious, but not myself when we're sitting in a room just talking about how horrible a situation is or a person is, and then having, the old sheriff come in and sit down and just say, is it really that big a deal? And to look at the human element in individuals. But the biggest leadership lesson probably that I've learned, and it's the hardest one because we all want to have friends and be liked, and is to finally just let that go and realize. And I know there's the, hey, you either you can either be respected or you can be liked. No, it's not either or. I mean, in the middle is okay. So it's okay to be a jerk, it's okay to be both. But to really set a culture and define a culture where you have standards, and those standards are going to be met, and you're going to put the people first in the community, and then that means that we are going to have to step up and do things, and that we're going to have to render a lot of our comfort internally. And it's not just about making everybody happy and comfortable within your organization, but really challenging an organization. And I've seen leaders do two different things. There's two different types of morale that I've seen within organizations. One is providing them with benefits, with, hey, I'm going to put you on K9. I'm going to come up with a K9 position when I don't even need one. Or we're going to have additional people on our SWAT team. Or I'm going to give you more toys. I'm going to give you a fancier car. Or are you going to invest in them individually and create a culture of learning and a culture that is uncomfortable, and put the citizens first and create the best environment to provide the best service to the citizenry, which requires a lot of commitment, a lot of time away from home. It requires you to be there. And one of the best leaders I've seen probably the most productive thing I've seen out of that leader. And we talked about one earlier that you had interviewed. That they are there, they show up, they're there early and they're there late, and not the person that talks a big game, comes in at 9 and leaves at 3, but also at Friday at 5 o'clock when they have a date with their spouse and they have had a horrible week. You have the officer that comes into their office and says, "Hey, Chief, do you have a minute?" And you don't have a minute. You had a minute Monday, you had a minute even Sunday, but you do not have a minute right then. And he doesn't say, "Can we keep it quick?" He doesn't say, "I've planned this all week. What do you got?" He says, "Yes." And he's done that back end communication with his wife or whoever that he had that commitment with that says, "Hey, I have another commitment and I'll make it up to you." And so are you not just are you there, but are you there when it counts?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that people see actions and value action so much more than talking about it. Because I think people can talk about it all day long and say, "I'm here, open door policy, walk in," but is it true? And people are waiting for you to prove that in order to build that trust. I do want to talk about some of the things that you were just explaining about creating culture. How do you, and we talked about this a little bit when we first connected, but how do you take a good department and make it a great department? What does that look like in actionable steps? And I know you said it's a big commitment and there's a lot that goes into it. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience and how you're creating a positive culture and how you're creating and developing a great department.
Okay, so a little of my history, I was involved in I mean, when I was a brand new officer, one of the things that I couldn't stand is, during training. I mean, just going to the different coffee shops, and it seemed kind of like this government job that people were getting paid for, and they would go to calls when they got called, not, just constant work, constant service. And it was a big letdown. And then I um realized that there was some corruption within the department. When I mean corruption, out of 100 people, maybe 3 individuals. And there were some indictments and stuff later on that we orchestrated to clean that up. And then as I continued to progress through the career in different facets, you know, focusing a lot on professional standards and internal affairs, not just getting rid of the corruption, but taking an organization from a good organization to a great organization. And then that's why I feel I was hired by this organization here in Durango. It was a good organization that had a culture, like I said before, of people coming in at 9 and leaving at 3, and you had a lot of good employees, but you didn't have a great culture. And to be able to transform that, we were talking about a chief previously that you had interviewed, and with that specific chief, there was somebody that disagreed with him, and I heard one of his commanders say, "Yeah, you can disagree with him all day, but he gets here before you do, and he leaves after you do, and he's here and he shows up." So it's hard to have too much disagreement with such a good leader, and it takes a lot of work. And you have a lot of negative voices, especially when you're, say you're down 10, 12 people, and your graveyard officers are just shaking doors, and they're taking very few reports, and the new officers are taking all the reports. And your culture is what you allow to happen. That entire department's watching that one officer that's been here for 20 years, so it doesn't feel like he has to take a report or doesn't feel like he has to do the work. And you tell your commanders, "You know what, we need to do something about that." And they was, "Well, if we do something about that, he's going to leave. And if he leaves, we're already down this many people. And if we, he, he's a good officer. If something bad happens, he's going to be there. He's going to be the one." It's that negative voice. But if you allow that cancer to continue to grow within your department, that's what you're going to have. And it's going to be the J curve, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. You're going to lose more people, and all those eyes are going to turn on you. and like, you're destroying our department. It's everybody's leaving. It's getting worse. But if you build it, trust me, they will come. If you put that culture, if you instill it, and real leaders start to step up, then other people like them start coming into the department. And it won't be long, trust me. You'll be looking around and you'll have an amazing department with really good employees, and it attracts other people. People want to be around great truth tellers that are into learning and growing, and they have organized lives at home, and they're effective. And I really think that's how you transform a culture, but it is hard. And then the other trap, you have to be careful, because if you're not vigilant, you'll get back to where you started. So if you think you have hit your stride, and it's okay to hit your stride and to let that ego set in and be like, look, we have a great department, you're going to be right back where you started if you don't continue to, I mean, all those things that got you there in the first place is, you can't disregard them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that you never arrive somewhere, and um I think you're exactly right. I think when you feel like you have arrived, you feel like there's no more growth or nothing else to learn. And then that's when stagnation, right? It's like that analogy of like you let up on the gas and someone passes you by type of thing. Like if you're not growing, you're dying. I know it sounds so morbid, but that's always been my like motto. And so it's like how can you, and it doesn't have to be huge strides all the time, but how can you continuously be trying to learn and to grow and to make things better. And so I don't think that you ever arrive. It's not a destination, right? It's the journey. And I know it sounds so cheesy, but
I
that's how
don't
I
think
feel.
so.
I've been told in my life, and at first when someone said this to me, I was like, self-assessment again, right? Taking a look at like at me and being like, okay, is this true? Is it not? Is there maybe some truth to it? But someone said to me, someone who I think wants me to win and cares about me, um, that I'm really hard on people and I have a really high standard. And at first I was like, man, am I really hard on people? Is the standard that I'm setting unreasonable or unachievable? Like what is it that I'm doing? And I think to your point, we have to have high standards for ourselves and for other people. And we have to always be trying to achieve that. We have to be striving to be better. And I do think that people will rise to the level that you set. People want to be successful, and of course, you don't want it to be completely unattainable where people get discouraged. But I think that we have to keep raising that bar and we have to understand when it's time to raise it even more. And maybe that's just my opinion, and maybe I do hold people at a really high standard. But you know what? The people who are in my circle are awesome because I've set that standard. So I don't know. I don't know if I regret that.
No, I think that's a good standard to hold. And I love how you said people that love you and care for you. And I think that's important that not only leaders share that and mentor people. I mean, I didn't feel like I had a lot of mentors earlier in my life, but there are later in my career, I had several really good mentors. And I think one of the things, it was very similar to what you're talking about. They had high standards. They expected a lot from me, but they were with me on the journey.
Yeah.
And I think our colleagues and our friends, our family, everybody can smell a hypocrite a mile away. And if we truly love them and we're able to have that trust, and once we have that trust, we can and we empower them, and continue to coach and guide. I I think that's critical and hold that high standard.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about wellness and to me, and you can tell me your opinion, but to me, I think that when we talk about foundations, culture is the foundation, right? You have to have a healthy culture because you can throw all kinds of wellness stuff on top of it, and if it's not a healthy culture, it's not going to be successful from my experience. And so having that as the foundation first. In your opinion, what is wellness and what isn't wellness?
Well, I have a lot of mixed feelings on this. And,
Okay.
I came from a department where we focused on culture and defining a good department, and I mean, I started back in 2000 where you didn't even talk about this stuff. You
Yeah.
came to work and you were strong, and even a lot of stories about how tough everybody was. Um, but I mean, it was a completely different culture when I started in this profession, where you didn't even talk about wellness at all. And I do think there's a balance. And my previous agency that I retired from, we we thought we had a wellness program, but a lot of the officers didn't trust it, and they didn't trust if the information was available to the staff, and it really wasn't structured, and there wasn't a lot of talk in the community about wellness within organizations. And there was an incident that where one of our detectives just a beautiful mother, a beautiful person, an amazing detective. She was outstanding, and took her own life in the parking lot. And the looking back, um, I feel like I was part of that culture uh, that didn't really focus on wellness. We focused on the job, we focused on the service aspect of it, but we didn't really have that balance. And here at Durango, it was interesting when I walked into this job as the deputy chief. The chief at the time had a focus on it, and so I focused on it
Hmm.
and went out, started educating myself and seeing what we could pull in. We had a peer support. We started a chaplaincy program. Well, we had one. Everybody kind of has one on and off, I think, but some people we made it more front and center. And then Brower Psychological was part of it, and we had like the Sigma Tactical Wellness woven in there. And then we did stuff like free um, uh, rec center passes, and then we did our critical incident brief debriefings and everything else. But then we did something a little different where we provided a letter to the spouses, because when I started in this job, I didn't go home and tell my family about all the different benefits that we had within the department, especially the wellness benefits. And so I know the families don't know about a
Mm.
lot of the officers that we hire. And so this letter kind of explains everything, but it's for the spouses, it's for the partners, it's for the family. And then we provide a book, I Love a Cop, and then Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement's another book that we give them. And then this letter, and then we provide all the resources. And we focused on it a lot more here in Durango. And then we had an employee that reached out. And that meant a lot to me because he reached out at the right time. And I just felt like we had a soft place to land.
Mm.
And that was important to me as a leader. And I really learned a lot about that. And I was glad that the chief at the time had put that focus, and that we had created such a cadre of benefits, and we were able to make those connections at that point. But then the department was looking at us and watching us, and what are we going to do now? So I thought it was vital that we take all those steps and communicate well with our employees and continue to see that through in the right way. And as we continue this journey, I kind of saw another side too. So I'm going to be honest. I really, a lot of the benefits that we have, I had 3 kids and I took 3 days off for those 3 kids. FML, what? I didn't know. It's a different culture nowadays with this 3 months of FMLA. And when you're short shifted and you have people out there working, in even the intermittent FMLA that I've seen is a little different for me. And um, and one of the things that we started that I really like is and I've seen that chiefs around the country have continued to push a resiliency. coaching option, and some of them have made it mandatory.
Mhm.
And ours isn't mandatory, but it's an opt out. One thing I've found about law enforcement is if you have to sign up for it or put any extra work into it, there's going to be a really low percentage, maybe 20-30% that we're going to get to sign up. So we did a sign up. We signed everybody up. It's not mandatory,
Interesting.
but they have to do an opt out.
Okay.
And so the numbers just went up, and everybody was like, "Yeah, I'll do it. I just didn't want to. I'm busy. I didn't want to sign up for it, whatever." And
Interesting.
so that increased the numbers, and and we've attached a day off for each program, each session that they have to spend with their families, and focus on that resiliency coaching session that they have, and that's twice a year, and so we implemented that. But your question was that I've danced around, obviously. Your question was the balance between wellness and I one of the issues that I am trying to educate myself through right now is where all of these benefits fit in, and then also doing the job, because the job's hard. And I grew up, we don't talk about it at all, to now we have lots of benefits. We're putting a lot into wellness, and even to the point where some officers have resigned and said, I talked to the counselor, this really isn't for me. Where I thought maybe there was a little bit too much rumination on that, or going back and digging up everything in their past. And one of these books that I've read, The Subtle Art of Not Giving, whatever, um, one of the cool things that he talks about in there is like how a lot of counselors, or a lot of professions in general, feel like when you pay them a lot of money, they have to give you all these magical things in your life, when it may just be one or two little things that you could fix and you're back on track. Kind of like I told you before with our counselor walking through the office saying, "Hey, what are you not doing right now that you were doing 2 months ago when you were happy? Exercise. Okay, how about Wednesday? This Wednesday you exercise." And then another goal for Friday, and putting people on commitments and things of that nature, like a golf swing. Your golf coach, pay them all this money, and they just move your trigger finger a little bit in your grip, and all of a sudden you're hitting straight, and you're like, I paid you all that for that. And so finding that balance between ruminating on all the past things, because I'll tell you, when my dad died, and I'm a person that doesn't ruminate. I've never talked about all the things I've seen. I've never talked about all my trauma. And I've had a lot of head injuries too, from football and sports and everything else. I just keep focusing on what's ahead of me. And I try not to look back on any of that. But when my dad died, and they came in and they bagged him up in that same bag that I've seen for years, and the way they were handling him, the way they were standing around him, talking about the thing that they were carrying, everything in my career for the next week came back into my life, and affected me in a very negative way. And before that, I kind of had a shell, and a lot of this stuff was for other people, not for me. And that experience helped me in a lot of ways. But it also helped me think about my detectives at the time. And we were having a lot of homicides and different things. And we had a young man that was drowned by his father on purpose. Um, and one of my detectives was at the hospital. And this is the detective that never says no. Like, if you tell them to do something, you're like, "Hey, can you look into this thing?" And you don't give them any groundwork or anything, they're going to figure it out, and they're just going to get back to you with a result. He tells me, "Hey, boss, I don't know anything about this case. I don't know what you're talking about." Because I asked him to go into the church at the hospital and tell the mother that her 5-year-old son was dead. And I was slow. And I'm like, "Well, I'll send you the case report. Yeah, just go in and this is crazy. I can't believe we did this. We used to have our detectives do the notifications also, and carry the caseload, and do the investigation, while they're getting somebody beating on their chest, crying because their child died." Which I think was a really bad procedure, that we definitely don't do over here. Um,
But I caught on to that. He did not want to walk in there and give that notification. So we went and did the notification. Um, but I think a lot of that stuff is important to work through, but I think we need to be mindful also of, when you have employees that have addictions, that their life is in chaos at home, that their life's not in order, and then they come to work and getting them that help, and ruminating on things and without, um that's what I'm trying to work. I'm trying to find the balance of mental wellness and coaching, but also focusing on our officers and the organization of their life in general. Because I mean, if you think about just sleep, finances, marriage, um, addictions, and addictions can be playing video games all night while you should be sleeping, so you can spend time with your family the next day. Anything of that nature, but kind of broadening that out instead of reducing it to find that balance.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think that the goal is to always get better. The goal is to how can we, and I have this saying, and I think it encompasses it perfect. Like the only way out is through. How do we
Oh,
get through, right? Like there's a lot, and you talk about like a storm, right? We're not running away from it, we're running through it, right? That's going to be the best way to get to the other side, right? Otherwise you're just prolonging it if we're running away from it, right? It's going to catch up to you eventually. You can't outrun a storm. But we can run through it and it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to, take that initiative. But how do you get through to the other side? I think that's the goal, right? It's
oh
not
yeah.
it's not that you're broken and you're broken forever. I also have said this before, and I think this is a really cool way to think about it because, and I like that you said you put in all the groundwork to create a soft space for people to land, right? You created culture, you created trust, you have the resources in place. Maybe someone doesn't need it today, but tomorrow they're in a situation like you were with your dad, where now you need something. And then again, the goal is to get you through that so that you can keep going and you can learn from it, you can grow from it, and you can thrive in spite of or because of those things. We are all going to have cracks, and sometimes we shatter. And I think of this. Have you heard of the artwork in Japan where they take old like ceramics that have broken and then they put gold in it and they make it even more beautiful? I feel like that's what it is. It's like, yes, we're going to have cracks. We might shatter, but we can put ourselves back together and we can be stronger and more beautiful than we were before. That's always the goal. And so I agree with you. I think that we can position it in that way and we can look at it in that way of like, you're not broken forever. We're going to make sure that you get through it. And one of the things that you said that I thought was really interesting, and I know we're running short on time, so maybe this is a whole nother conversation that we can have another day, but this idea of strength. You said this before earlier in your career. It was like, yeah, we were just, we were strong. We just like kept moving, and I think the strength is getting through it. And I think that when you start to see the avoiding, the numbing, the escaping, the alcohol, the addictions, all of those things, that's the running away from it. That's not getting through it. And so that's the true strength. And again, two things can exist at once. You can be super strong and you can work through these things and you can get to the other side. I'll get off my soapbox now. But
Oh, I completely agree. And I love the analogy of getting through the storm or going with the storm. And
Mhm.
I've heard the cattle and the buffalo and I mean, it's just amazing.
100%.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and but what I love also is going through the storm with somebody. And there's nothing I love more than, I mean, it breaks my heart. I walk into the briefing room and the briefing, dissipated and everybody's out taking calls and there's one employee in a room crying, talking to a sergeant. I love that. I walk by, I'm the last person they want to see, probably the chief. Oh no, I don't go in and say, hey, what's going on or what's the problem? Because I'm like, no, this is working exactly how it's supposed to be working because I have a sergeant going through the storm with that individual. And I don't need that sergeant coming into my office afterwards telling me, Go, I saw you walked in. Let me tell you what's going on. I need a sergeant that says, you know what? I'm with my people. I'm
Mm,
handling it. We're going through the storm together. And that's another drip of that leadership that we were talking about earlier. And if you can create that culture and be in it together, because at the end of the day, you're right. And I love different coaches and what they say, and Nick Saban, everybody knows who he is, and he's a wonderful coach and he has some great speeches, but he says at the end of the day, and he gets all the best players, or when he was coaching, he did, and a lot of them show up and they're the best in the country, but they're still not going to make his team unless they put in the work. And I love what he says, and it has a lot of meaning if you understand what he's talking about. And at the end, he says, at the end of the day, it takes what it takes.
mm,
If you're going to be on my team, it takes what it takes. And when you're talking about balance and you're talking about resiliency and all these other things, at the end of the day, when you're in this profession and you're on scene and there's a domestic violence situation, or there's a DUI resulting in death and the family showing up, or there's a child that needs to be out of a house, and only your interview is going to get that done. It takes what it takes, and what it takes is the training that you did before, the intention you had in this job, the effort that you put in day after day to make you effective at what you're about to do. You're not just going to show up and be able to do it, and then those things are hard. But I agree with you, it doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. That, yeah, the job's hard and it takes what it takes, so good luck. We do need to get through those storms and get through them together. And that's why I think those first line supervisors are the most important positions in the entire agency, because they have those relationships to get through those storms with those individuals. But it doesn't give us a pass either from how those hallway conversations and those individual relationships also.
For sure. My last question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with them? If you could go back with all the knowledge you have now and speak to your younger self, what words of wisdom would you give?
So keep learning or be irrelevant. And I the reason I say, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about hitting your stride and being comfortable. Keep yourself in a state of discomfort.
Mm,
As soon as you feel like you've learned everything, move on. Move on to something different. We were talking about mental health, obviously, and we trade our innocence and we long for that innocence of who we were, but we get that experience, and that experience is what makes us effective. It allows us to serve in a higher capacity. And I mean, I didn't finish my master's program until 3 years ago, but it was the perfect time because I was just learning. I felt like I said, I was in field training my entire career, just learning and devoting all of my time towards being good at one thing in this area, and then moving to a different area. And then as soon as I got comfortable, time to get uncomfortable again. I hear so many officers say, yeah, I haven't learned everything yet, so I'm going to wait a while before I step into that next role. When you do step into that next role, you're not going to be ready.
mm,
You're not going to be completely effective. It's just the way it works. I would love to go back and be a good sergeant. I could be a great one. I would love to go back and be a good lieutenant or a good captain. I wish I could go back and do it again because I probably wasn't that great, but that's how it's going to be. And that's, and then just ask the people that you're serving, your colleagues, to have patience with you as you grow with them, because we're all growing together. And if you can keep learning and keep growing, and the other thing is be fit, be trained, be ready. Don't wait till the foot pursuit and be like, man, I need to get back into lifting. Or I got told in the academy that, hey, only 3 of you are going to be fit like you are now in 15 years. And we're all looking at each other like, no, not us. We're different. No, absolutely. And you're not going to be any good for anybody if you're not fit and if you're not trained and if you're not ready. We can't, I'm gonna get ready after you should have been ready. Think about it. I mean, active shooters in a school situation, if you're 2 or 3 steps from where you should have been, you could have saved a life. I mean, there's so many analogies and so many things we can talk about being prepared. But when the time for preparation or the time for action arrives, the time for preparation is long gone.
Yeah.
And that's, I think a lot of us let ourselves go. And then I'm just going to reiterate what I said at the very beginning. Be a leader, be a leader now. You could still be in training and be humble and only speak up when you need to speak up at certain times. But there's never a time you can't grab somebody and speak in private and correct a situation and be a truth teller. Even if you're wrong, they'll respect you for it. And I know there's a nuance there and there's a balance there, but you don't have to wait to be a leader.
Thank you. Chief Current, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. This was a super cool opportunity, and I appreciate the space you're in as well.
Of course.